It's small things that how you present yourself, how you speak and how you shake a hand. It's all reflection of the business, because for me, that business is me. But I'm still teaching that to the team, that this business is an extension of you, your personal brand.
Standing out in the competitive business world requires a well-crafted brand strategy. But how do you create a strategy that not only captures attention, but also resonates deeply with your target audience? Welcome to the DesignRush podcast. Join us as we unravel the secrets behind successful brand building and marketing campaigns. I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. With a sharp wit and wealth of experience, our guest for today has not only navigated the challenging terrain of the industry, but also transformed numerous small businesses into powerful brands. Please welcome to the show, the president and founder of Entice International, Adam O'Leary. So, okay, let's get down to brass tacks, as they say. You founded Encite during the economic crisis in 2008. And soon after that, you got laid off from the company that you were employed at. So what was it that pushed you to work on Encite during that time? And more importantly, actually, what were some of the key things you learned from starting Encite during that time, which was like a really tough time for everybody, of course?
Yeah, it was the economic crisis of 2008 that really pushed me. I mean, I did start the company 3 years earlier officially, while I was working client side with a software company. But it was just something to, earn a few extra bucks. I had some friends that had small businesses. I made them a business card or whatever. It was always that kind of thing. Yeah. So in 2005, I started the business officially. I had a few friends that had businesses, and made a couple of different small projects for them as best I could. But when I got laid off on the client side in 2008, that's what kind of pushed me out of the nest, if you will. There was just there's no jobs out there. I decided it's like, I think that's maybe the catalyst that I needed to kind of get me going. And it's out of a need to pivot, a need to make money, a need to drive that business. And sometimes we just need that little push. And fortunately for me, it worked out well. At the time, it was a little stressful and nerve-wracking, but I needed that push. I had to kind of learn new skills. I had to learn different kind of software. I had to just kind of drive it, and that's what I did. I kind of consumed any and all information that I could, any and all content that I could. I went back to classes at some community college stuff, and started to learn those things. And I would find those things or identify those things that I needed to learn just by talking with clients or talking with colleagues, or that kind of thing. And going to networking events, which I was 100% against. I'm a pretty social person, but even as an adult, walking into a room of 100 people you don't know is it's awkward sometimes. So, but I just pushed myself to do that, and I said, I'm getting up and I'm doing it. And it was a huge lesson and very valuable for me kind of moving forward.
Absolutely. That makes a whole lot of sense. And that's actually really inspiring that you were able to take something like that crash, which really, let's be honest, destroyed so many lives during that time. It was really awful. Okay, so of course you have learned a lot during that time of the economic crash, and obviously going on with Encite. I'm wondering though, what are some of the key things that you mentioned now that you still apply to working in an agency environment now and with branding for businesses? Are there things that you mentioned before that you still use to this day?
I still use my skills that I was learning. At one point, I was doing, the graphic design. So I, learned, the Adobe software and learned to manipulate things. But one thing I learned there is I know that at one point, you just can't be the jack of all trades. You can't do everything. And bringing in people that specialize in that and are focused in creative development takes our work to a different level, takes our client work to a different level. But I think the one thing that is really beneficial is I still have some working knowledge of that, right? So I know kind of in speaking with clients and communication with clients or colleagues or whatever, I still have that working knowledge enough to say, which is valuable for me to talk about deadlines and how long, certain things take. So I have that knowledge rather than relying on my team, who my team is phenomenal, but it helps to continue that communication on the client side, because I think communication is one of those things that is super key and super beneficial to both sides, to keeping us accountable, to keeping them accountable, and even kind of building relationships on the client side. It's I think that's one of our big focuses, is making sure that communication is continuing and consistent and cohesive with our clients as well. So a lot of those skills that I learned early are very much applicable now, and even try to expand some of those. So continue to try to learn.
100%. That's a really good note as well. I don't think any of us ever stop learning. But I do think you're absolutely right in that sense. Communication and transparency when working with clients, I think, is the number one way to ensure a smoother process, even when the process isn't as smooth.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Exactly. Just being on the same page helps so much already. Okay, you tackle a variety of positions at Encite from what I read.
Mm-hmm.
But what was it that first drew you to the agency life? I mean, did you see yourself running a full-fledged creative agency as a university student?
At the time, I didn't. I mean, you see kind of agency in movies and TV and how glamorous it is, and everybody's dressed well, and you're in a great office, and it's super fun. But obviously that's kind of sensationalized in the TV and stuff. But I started off right out of university as a salesperson, and this was back in early 2000s, and I don't know if this happens very much anymore, but I was making phone calls and just cold calling inside sales. And I think one motivator for me there is it's just not me. I didn't enjoy that type of work, and I know some people do, and they thrive there. I just never really thrived there. But after jumping around a couple jobs, I did get a job with a small agency, and that small agency kind of inspired me to be like, well, I think I can kind of do some of this. And looking at their processes, they had some great processes and had some great staff and creative people. But at one point they went under, so the company folded, and I thought to myself, I was like, and it was in the back of my mind, I was like, I think I can do that. And I just started to kind of build my skills, kept that in the back of my head, and then when that catalyst hit in 2008, that's what kind of pushed me to go. But I learned a lot there, and learned a lot how the process works, for sure.
Exactly. Were they just, this is completely off topic, but just to carry on with what you just said about that company, were they a startup, or were they already established before they went under?
They were pretty well established. They were they were in a small Colorado town north of Denver, so they had a pretty well established client base, and some big names locally, that people would recognize locally. But I think that they were trying to expand out. They tried to do some speaker series events. They tried to develop some trade shows, which some went well, some didn't. And I don't know the financials from the back end. I wasn't privy to that, but I know that some of the speaker series stuff they did just didn't do really well, and maybe that was a kind of a financial burden on them. But yeah, they were really well established. The leaders of that group and leaders of that company had really deep ties to the area, and had big networking, and knew a lot of people in that group, and that's kind of how they drove business, was those personal relationships they had, which can be super successful. So I think some of the things that happened, I didn't know about on the back end, but maybe that kind of contributed there. But they did great work.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why I ask is because I know, especially for when you're just starting out at an agency or any type of career move that you're making, where it's like a grown-up career. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When it's like that, I know even for myself, I started out with startups, and I mean, the amount of things I learned from the startup environment is invaluable. But unfortunately, it happened that, maybe the investments weren't coming in as much. That's actually the reason why I asked. But yeah, I mean, startup environments are, in my opinion, some of the best places where you can learn about anything. I mean, it's completely having to roll with the punches constantly.
Yeah.
But in
Yep.
any case,
It's out of necessity. Like, I mean, that's kind of when I started. It's like it was out of necessity. I have to learn these things and I have to do these things out of necessity because nobody else is going to do them, or you don't have the budget to hire somebody to do them. So when somebody's starting out in a small agency, I think you learn a ton. Like you said, 100%. But the flip side to that is it's a little volatile, right? Like it's not as stable as maybe some of the bigger agencies, right? But at any point in time, I guess, things can change and your career could change, and things could change and you be out of a job. So you never know.
Exactly. But if anything of your move with Insight to really go full on with that has told us anything with regards to this, even that, even the fact that it is a bit volatile is, I think, extremely valuable in that sense that you still learn how to actually navigate and roll with the punches when it comes to something like that. I think, at the end of the day, you do something and it doesn't work, but then you learn how to navigate that, right?
100%. And that's one of the things that we focus in with our group is, maybe, something happened and didn't go the way that we wanted to. Maybe, we lose a client, but the evaluation part of that is key. And we've learned over the years to set up, processes in place so we can collect information, collect market research. And for me, it's not only, current clients, because current clients are typically super happy with you. You're doing everything great, that kind of thing. But one things that we really concentrate on are those kind of exit interviews with clients. What did we do wrong? What did we miss? What did you need that we didn't provide? Because we want to get better at that kind of thing. And we also do that whenever we're doing, we put together a proposal, for a potential client, or we respond to an RFP, or we're entering, some kind of awards, thing. We always want to get the feedback from the judges, from the potential client. So we have a process in place, because I want to know what we did wrong, or maybe it's just a small thing that we didn't do. I don't know, but if I don't know that information, I can't fix it and I can't get better.
Exactly. I mean, that's another invaluable thing, I think, is feedback. Getting feedback is, I think, one of the best things. And not so much, I know there's a few people that maybe don't respond too well to feedback or criticism, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
But I think, again, if you learn how to maybe look at stuff as a thick skin, with a thick skin, it definitely helps you improve in the long run, for sure.
Yep, 100%.
So just getting back to Insights a little bit, was there ever like an aha moment that you had while growing Insight? Like, what helped you get through the most challenging moments of launching a creative industry, or a creative agency, back then?
You know what? I kind of mentioned it before. So there was an aha moment to where I was doing some graphic design work, right? And it was pretty basic. But then you start to, and I think every designer looks at, is super critical, I guess, of their work, right? Like, and especially, well, at least I am. I was always super critical. There's some aha moments where we develop something. I'm like, that's just not good enough, right? Like, it's beyond my capability. I need somebody to come in and help, and that's kind of that aha moment of, if I'm going to continue to do this, number one, I can't do it all, and I can't do accounts receivable and accounts payable and new business development and web design and graphic design and social media marketing. I can't do it. Like, I don't have the time in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So there was I forget which project it was, but I was creating something that was beyond my capabilities for a client. And it was kind of clicked, and I was like, it's not good enough. I don't have the experience as a designer. I don't have the skills. I need to find somebody that does. And that's what I started to do. And then that's kind of how it continued to grow. Right. And then you start to think, Okay, well, I learned a little bit of web design. Well, my lesson from graphic design, I'm not a full-time web developer. I'm at best a fractional web developer. Well, somebody who does that 100% of the time is way better at that than me. So,
100%.
yeah. So that was an aha moment. I don't remember that project, but I remember looking at that and saying, "This I can't. If I'm going to grow this thing, I can't do it this way."
Yeah, exactly. That's actually quite incredible. So, yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think, like you just said, you're one person, and trying to run things like that by yourself doesn't necessarily work out so great. But it is amazing that you decided to actually get people to come and join you in that, and look what you managed to do after
Yeah,
that too.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, amazing
Thanks.
how things like that just snowball.
Yeah, things are going
Yeah.
well. Yeah, we're doing well. So I'm proud of kind of where we are, but try to continue to take us, higher as well. So
Exactly. Yeah, of course. So, okay, in one of your vlogs, you talked about applying business goal settings to personal resolutions we may have. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of of that and how you applied this to your own life and goals?
yeah, I mean, I think as an entrepreneur, when you start out, I mean, your personal goals and business goals, I mean, tend to kind of merge a little bit, right? Like for me, the business is an extension of me. It's very personal because I started it, right? Like, so making sure that we set those goals of what we're trying to achieve, how we're presenting ourselves. I mean, it's all kind of, it's branding. It's kind of, developing brand attributes, not only for yourself, but for your business. But that was a struggle for me too, is that business is an extension of me, right? Like, it is a reflection directly on me. So it is very personal for me. So those kind of things go hand in hand. And like I said in the last question about developing a piece of artwork that's just not up to a standard of mine. Well, that personally reflects me, right? So I think it's super important for me to make sure that those kinds of things, those things align. And it's small things that how you present yourself, how you speak and how you shake a hand. It's all reflection of the business, because for me, that business is me. And it's I'm trying to get beyond that. I'm trying to get to where we're expansion of our team, but I'm still being that to the team, that this business is an extension of your personal brand. And if your business goals, how you present yourself in a business environment and aligned with how you present yourself personally, that's going to be benefit to you personally in the long run as well, right? Like
Of course.
this is a good example of getting some of our other team members to talk about PPC or design or social, and get them on these podcasts. Yes, you're representing encite, but that's great for you as a personal brand, that you're a thought leader, that you're out there, that you're getting awareness. I mean, if and when you leave encite and go work somewhere else, well, hey, you got this whole library of stuff that shows that you're a problem solver. You know what I mean? It shows you're getting out there and doing these things, and I think that's really, really important.
Exactly. I really like that note, actually. I think it is so important for us in our careers, definitely, to sort of put ourselves out there. And definitely, especially with the way that social media is going now, these days people consume video content like no one's business. I think it's so important for us to actually share what it is that we know, and really talk about how we perceive our industries being and stuff. I think that's amazing as a founder of the company, that you're actually telling your employees that. It's amazing. It shows that you actually really do care about their growth.
Yeah, we always want to build a culture inside that everybody is growing, and I'm not naive enough to know that every person on our team is going to stay with us for the next 20 years, right? Like I get it. Like, they're going to want to move somewhere else. They're going to want to try something different. They're going to, whatever it is, they want to, do whatever, right? Go on a sabbatical to Portugal, for example, right? Like, I mean, whatever. So I understand that, but you still want them to do better, right? And help them do better. And if you're treating people like that, and you're being authentic, and you really want them to grow and thrive, I think that's a great environment to have, and I think that's just good for all of us.
Exactly. Yeah, I really love that. So, okay, I'd like to get more towards like insights and brand strategy. So, first of all, before I get started on all of that, congratulations on receiving that prestigious 14-year award. 14-year? Is it 14?
14er 14er
14er
award.
award, excuse me. So, congratulations for
Thank
winning the 14er award. Seriously. I think you got that for the collaboration or for your collaboration with Rocky Mountain Wireline Service, correct?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
That was our 2023, or excuse me, it was for last year. So we won it this year for work that we did in 2022. So that's kind of how that works. But yes, thank you. We're very proud of the work that we did for them. And I think it was super beneficial for them, but it was part of a broad brand strategy project that we did for them.
Mm-hmm. So could you tell us a little bit more about, what the specific project or initiative was that led to that recognition that you received?
Yeah, so it was Rocky Mountain Wireline reached out to us and explained that they were kind of having some pretty significant problems with their marketing. So I mean, this happens quite often. Somebody says, "Well, our lead gen is not working. Our marketing person quit. Whatever the reason is." But after several conversations with them, we kind of identified that it wasn't necessarily the tactical execution of the marketing. They were in a pretty blue collar industry. I mean, it's in oil and gas. Okay. So there is a lot of personal relationships in the sales process. There's a lot of entertainment, people playing golf and going to lunches and all that kind of different thing. But after some conversations, we kind of identified they had a big issue with, number one, with messaging. They just didn't know what that message was to their client. But then, after those other conversations, we knew that we needed to build out a full brand strategy, and we needed to find those brand attributes. We needed to look at what their competitors are doing, what their competitor messaging is, who their audience is, creating those, people call them avatars or ideal customer profiles. But those are super key, and that's kind of part of the whole brand strategy process. But it's very common that somebody calls us and says, "Hey, I have this problem," and then we start to discuss and say, "Well, we don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think there's an issue here, and we need to address this before we can do this." And I think we say with our brand strategy, we always talk about, we can jump into tactical all we want. We can make a Facebook page and start sending emails out and putting ads on, Facebook and LinkedIn and all that kind of thing. But if we don't have the strategy,
exactly.
we're wasting money. So
Yeah.
I mean, so we either do this kind of stuff in the beginning and really dial in what we want and who we want to reach and what we want to communicate to them. That's super key there. And I think the other key for Rocky Mountain Wireline was getting the leadership team all on one page. And that's kind of part of the process is, we're in a visioning session, we're in a room, and I know sitting in a conference room for a whole day, chatting and stuff I understand that people want to be out and about and doing things, but I think it's key to make sure that everybody's vision is communicated, and everybody's heard from the leadership team. But the key that comes out of that is everybody agrees on the direction, agrees on the strategy moving forward, because that's going to trickle down to the rest of the company. So if there's one person on a leadership team who doesn't believe what the CEO is doing, and the CEO is only just unilaterally directing everything, it comes out in conversations with staff, with vendors, with employees, with customers. It's all those little things that they say are bad mouthing this or that is going to erode trust and credibility in the brand, going to erode trust and credibility in the business. And if you don't have trust and credibility, nobody's going to buy from you, So exactly. That's kind of how we started with Rocky Mountain Wireline. So, and that's something that we do pretty frequently for clients. So
Very cool. So, okay, just on that note as well. So it sounds like maybe those conversations might have been a bit challenging. those boardroom conversations that as you were saying. So, how did you go about navigating that communication, like from your agency with them trying to how did you get everybody on the same page?
We have a series of exercises and kind of Q&A sessions that's part of that visioning session that we really just kind of walk through. And before we start the visioning session, I mean, we make it very clear that, we want them to be candid. I mean, if you're not candid in the conversation, we can't address. It's just talking about evaluation we were talking about earlier. I want people to tell us, anything that's on their mind, and they can use curse words, they can communicate it however they want to communicate it, but just get that out. And so really that part of it, it's pretty organic that we're having to kind of navigate and kind of direct the group to trying to get the information that we want and trying to get to uncover kind of their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, and their experience. So we do let it organically kind of evolve in the session, but we need to bring them back to kind of subject when we kind of go off on a tangent, right? So, but I think that there are some hard conversations in that room, and there have been people that have gotten pretty heated and definitely loud with each other. But that not necessarily Rocky Mountain Wireline, but with other clients have done that, and obviously it was still professional, but at the same time, it was getting out all of that, getting out that information from each individual. We just need to kind of corral them a little bit, kind of guide them a little bit through the process. So the sessions are very beneficial. There's a lot of things that kind of come out that they wouldn't normally come out, or somebody's afraid to tell the CEO for whatever reason. But if we're in the room, we're kind of trying to facilitate that a little bit. It's kind of a safe space, if you will, kind of thing. But we communicate to make sure that, we want that candidness.
So, okay, encite's focus is on small businesses aiming to build their brand. What do you think are some of the up-and-coming businesses' most frequent mistakes that they're working, when working towards success? Is there anything that you've noticed that people need to maybe keep an eye out for?
The biggest mistake I think we've seen with small to medium-sized businesses is they are jumping into tactical fast, and I understand vast majority of the time they are pressured by their boss, the CEO, whoever that is like, hey, we need to get this done. And if there's no strategy behind it, like we talked about earlier, you're going to kind of miss the mark. And I think another big one that I've seen mistakes is, handing off different kind of tasks, based on their current resources. And I can totally understand that. We only have, 5 employees, and we need to make a flyer for our trade show. Well, Jennifer over here took a Photoshop class once. Let's have Jennifer make a flyer for us for our trade show. And it comes back to the thing that I learned is, if I'm marginally involved in some of that, I'm not going to produce something that's really impactful. In fact, you're going to probably produce something that is detrimental to you, right? Doesn't represent you in that right light. So I've seen, I can completely understand with budgets, with finances, with resources, small businesses are trying to do more with less. But how you put priority on how you present your business and how you present yourself is a huge mistake, just based on that, and just based on kind of what the resources they have. So that's I could go on and on about things that I would do differently in small businesses, but I think those are kind of the 2 big ones, is not really identifying and doing some research before you jump into tactical, and then putting some kind of task on one of your team members that they just don't have the skills, they just don't have the experience to do that, and you're probably hurting yourself more than you're helping yourself.
That's an excellent point. Really, I think that's an excellent point. I think a lot of people end up doing that, and yeah, like you said, it can be detrimental. But in saying that, though, what is then the ideal way to kind of go through that then? What is the ideal way to solve that issue then, if you're not able to really get the resources to, say, for instance, have a nice flyer designed, as you mentioned. As opposed to getting someone that just did getting Jennifer to do the flyer because she did a Photoshop class once.
Yeah.
What is the alternative to that?
Well, I mean, outside of obviously like bringing on somebody who's, obviously an expert in that field, right? Or an agency,
Sure.
I mean, there's a ton of resources out there that, I mean, just taking this example, I mean, I would much rather somebody go to some of the online resources and grab some sort of template or something and then recreate that template, which I guarantee is going to be off brand.
Yeah.
But, so there's other issues there, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I would either find, some kind of freelance person that's specific to that area to help them create something that it's at least professional, following graphic design standards, making sure that, we just had a client that we did a print ad for, just finished it up yesterday. And I could see, in the past they've done it themselves. Well, they didn't know what a bleed is, right? And so now there's an issue with there's too much stuff outside of the active area, which, all of these kind of graphic design centers, they just don't know. But if you were just to at least get, a graphic designer, freelancer, somebody that has some experience, you could still probably afford that, right? Like that's probably pretty affordable.
Sure.
But at the very least, I would do some research. I mean, Google has everything and anything and everything out there you can do research on. Do some research, and that would be like one of my biggest things is, jump out there and find some more information, or talk to a colleague. Talk to somebody that's in the space. I'm sure somebody in your LinkedIn network would go have coffee with you, right? And kind of give you some. We do that all the time.
Nice. That's cool. I like that. I haven't myself done that yet, actually. Gone to coffee with one of my LinkedIn connections yet, but hopefully that will happen at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, your agency is also known for its strategic approach from a branding lens. How would you describe Encite's brand strategy?
That's a really good question. We have an internal strategy for, especially for new business development, but our brand strategy is, well, part of our brand attributes is to be authentic, real, and we talked about the word candid a lot, but we are very candid, and so that we want to make sure that our communication with our clients is also candid. So our brand strategy is very focused on building relationships. It's very focused on being super authentic and real, and making sure that communication is open and transparent. I think we use that word a lot. People use it, but I think it's key to make sure that we're transparent. But I think one of the things that is kind of paramount for our brand strategy is part of that transparency is, when we mess up, I'll tell you, we messed up, we dropped it, and it happens. We do everything in our power not for it to happen. But say that social media post didn't go up, on that day that you needed to go, we dropped the ball. I apologize. We put in some, processes in place so it doesn't happen again. But I think that's one of our key things there is I think that builds a better relationship with our clients, because everybody messes up, right? But it's how we react to how we mess up, or how we miss something, which is the more important thing in our eyes. And it's a very positive reaction from our clients with that candor and with that openness, because whenever you kind of do drop the ball on something, I guess the natural reaction is like, oh, we didn't do that, it was because of X, Y, and Z, let's try to make an excuse, right? But
Exactly.
you're never gonna do that. But our brand strategy is to making sure that there's that authenticity and that openness and transparency.
Exactly. And I mean, on the other hand, who does not respect someone who takes accountability and learns from their mistakes?
Yep.
Seriously, that's
100%.
exactly.
It's with any business. If you were building a home and you didn't miss something, I get it. Like, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of moving parts, but it's how you react to that when they say, hey, this is wrong. If you can say, hey, you know what, I'll come over and fix it right away, no problem, or I won't charge you for that, whatever that is, I'm sorry, goes a long way.
100%, exactly. I think that can also, again, be applied to so many different things in life too.
Yeah.
So how can brands work to differentiate their voice across all marketing touch points, like especially considering today's oversaturation of branded messaging, would you say?
I think the key is a lot of brands compete on the same type of messaging, or the kind of the same positioning, right? So a good example for us that comes out in brand strategy is the research that we do on competitors, whether that's direct competitors or indirect competitors. What are they saying? What's their main message, their primary message, secondary message, tertiary? A good example of that is we're working with a client that's in the kind of landscaping business. They have a pretty big competitive environment. And how are you differentiating yourself from all of those other kind of landscaping groups, right? And they're competing on price, they're competing on timeliness, they're competing on, all of our people are background checked, or whatever that is. But I think the key there is to differentiate your messaging. Is you don't have to necessarily differentiate yourself from every other business. You just have to differentiate yourself from those who are competing with you in the space. And even more granularly, you could differentiate yourself from those people in just that geographic area, right? So that competitor research is key.
If you think about it like that.
Say that again.
I think it makes it a lot easier to stand out when you think about it like that.
Yeah. I mean, the landscaping group is a good example, because you don't have to compete with every other landscaper across the country. Somebody in Sandusky, Ohio could be competing on the same messaging that you have. Yeah, but you're not competing with them, right? Like they're geographically, you may have some similar messaging, but it's the people that you're here in your geographic area that the area you're servicing, that's the key. But I think that is, I think that's key, is competitor research, identification, and then also, what are those indirect competitors saying as well. So if you're going to the movies, well, there's a lot of other different entertainment options. So what is the competition to go into the movies? Well, Netflix, you can watch it at home. Oh, you can go to the opera, you can go to the play, you can go to the local comedy club, whatever that is, right? Like, so, identifying those indirect competitors as well. So if in the landscaping business, well, if you're putting in grass for as a landscaper, well, what's your indirect competitors? Xeriscaping maybe, or whatever that kind of stuff is. But we're working with them to try to identify what that messaging is in their competitive environment, and then we're differentiating them from those people.
I love that. I've never thought about it like that, actually. That's super interesting. I like that. That it sounds to me already like a way to start and be successful right from the get, honestly.
Yeah. So, like you don't want to compete on, you don't want to compete on, you can compete on a bunch of different things, right? Like price is the big one. Well, sure. I can do it cheaper than to the next guy. Well, do you really want to get into that, like, price? Anybody who's choosing you is just choosing you based on how cheap you are. Well, then you're going to have to cut costs, and there's a whole other thing with that, right? So let's find another place to kind of compete.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. So in saying that, I know you guys also often mention the importance of the 3 C's. So being consistent, congruent, and cohesive, right? So
That's right.
What makes this a key component of brand messaging, would you say?
Well, all 3 of those are key, right? Consistency, congruency, cohesiveness, right? So we want to make sure that not only in brand messaging that everybody is speaking with one voice, saying the same things, not rattling off, visioning statements like robots. Like, we don't want to do that. We want it to be organic, but each person in an organization, and it starts from the leadership down, right? Like when they're at, even if you're at a cocktail party or a barbecue or whatever, and somebody asks what you do, you don't want them to kind of rattle off some kind of visioning statement, but you want them to say, well, here's what we do, and these are the things that we do, and this is how we compete, and this is kind of differentiated, but in an organic way. So from a messaging standpoint, obviously the things that are very client facing, websites and marketing material and all that kind of we can regulate that. Like, we can develop that for them, make sure that messaging follows the 3Cs. But how do we kind of do that top down within the organization with employees, staff, vendors, everybody else, to get them to kind of, speaking in that same language without, again, being a robot. But I think it's key that the other 3Cs are key in creative as well, right? Making sure that all of your marketing touch points, website obviously being, the largest of those, but everything that looks and feels the same, that if somebody saw your website, saw your trade show booth, saw a PPC ad, saw a social ad, whatever, saw your email, all of those elements and graphical elements all kind of go together and they're consistent. So,
Sure.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It does that trust and credibility. It does kind of more subliminal, subconscious kind of things of brand awareness. So there's nothing worse than it's probably good when a client brings to us and saying, here's the things we've done in the past, and they're not consistent. Well, because we think, hey, well, this is something we can help you improve upon because you need to be consistent. But you sometimes cringe on some of that stuff. It's like, well, this was done 4 years ago, and then we just redid the website. Well, if I was comparing those two things side by side, they don't look anything like yeah, exactly. So if somebody saw those you're missing in that opportunity that somebody's going to connect those two things. And I think the struggle there is some of that's kind of intangible, for clients, that but it's super crucial.
So do you think in that sense, like when someone is, for instance, like redoing some of their branding, trying to keep it up with the trends, I suppose, in that sense, I mean, of course, that must be quite detrimental if you look at that side of the coin when it comes to doing something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the any kind of trends or kind of creative trends, from a graphic or design standpoint, the one thing is that we want to create stuff, and typically we want to create stuff that are kind of timeless, right? That have a longevity for clients, because our clients aren't Fortune 500 companies. They don't have multi-million-dollar budgets. We want to take into consideration that we want this brand and this creative to last. And it's not to say that 10 years from now, you don't need to refresh something, because it happens. But we don't want to continue to change those kinds of things out. It's strictly kind of a budgetary concern. I think trends do really well in creative if you have that, those resources. And if you have those resources, I think you can do that. But that's just a constant revision and change. And I think you can really reach a lot of people, but and really kind of make yourself stand out from the competition. But that's a lot of work. And if you have those resources, I think that's a good thing. But typically our small to medium-sized business clients, they need something that will last for them, but it still follows those 3Cs. That still follows it something that's dynamic and interesting and eye-catching and all those different things. So I think trends work. It's just, how do you manage that, and how do you fund that? If you have limited resources and limited kind of financials.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, look, on the subject of trends right now, what are some of the biggest changes you've noticed in branding trends, especially from like Encite's launch in 2008 until today? I know that's a really big question, but are there any of these that you've seen that you think are a must follow for today, like right now?
Well, from a branding standpoint, some of the branding attributes or branding strategy, are kind of really time tested, right? But so I would still think those apply today than what they applied then. But from a creative standpoint, I think that the advent or the evolution of some of these other different marketing channels that are starting to break some of those brand guidelines. So, a logo, for example, was, at some point you had an icon and the name and the tagline, and following some of the standards where you never broke those up, right? They looked exactly like that every single time. Well, what happens when social comes along and you have to have an icon for your business page? And if you put that in there and you look at it on your phone, well, that's unreadable, unrecognizable. So those kinds of things have evolved, kind of that we're breaking those standards, just because of, the different channels and different tactics that have come along. So, I think that you just kind of have to roll with some of those new, tactics and channels. You just kind of have to, we talked about earlier, is continuing to stay educated, continuing to learn what are those best practices, from people in the industry and people in your industry. I think that's key to kind of learning how you can start to evolve some of these things. But from a branding standpoint, a lot of that is so timeless, and a lot of it's pretty focused of who you're trying to reach, what message, a pain point is for them. What problem are you solving? Where do they hang out? Is it in person? All of that kind of is timeless. But I think some of the creative stuff has evolved, just kind of out of necessity and out of the different channels that have come up.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense, actually. So, okay. And then again, on the topic of branding trends, I'm just, I don't know if you've seen, like you must have seen on the news recently, but it seems like there's like a revived buzz around AR and VR tech, especially with Apple that's like dropping their new AR VR Vision Pro headset in the US next year. So how do you see AR and VR technology impacting branding once that really starts to take off?
Yeah, I think that there's a big opportunity there. And I think that, obviously tech is driving a lot of different, industries, and it is being obviously into our daily lives, and more. So I think that, I think it impacts branding is we need to address some of those channels. We need to address some of those applications and opportunities. And I think the branding foundation is still there, but like I said, with like social, is like how are we evolving our brand to fit into the kind of this new tech, and how are we developing it to where it's at some point we're going to create some new brand standards, right? Like social can be a good example. That now there's new standard operating procedure. There's kind of new best practices in this space. So I think VR and AR is kind of the Wild West. I think that's where it's going, and I think it's a really cool opportunity. But if we stick with our kind of same core messaging, we can evolve the creative in those spaces, and we just got to evolve the creative, based on those specs, I guess, within each channel, within each new tech that comes out. So there needs to be a conversation around that. But I think the core brand strategy, brand attributes, and what you're doing, need that core will stay the same. But we just need to kind of address some of the new things that come up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, are there any other tech trends that you think people should be looking out for when it comes to developing a brand strategy, for instance?
You know what? There's some tech stuff. I mean, we all hear about it, Chat GPT, and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, and then you've seen some things probably on Instagram of things that go wrong when somebody creates has it create a video, ad for them, that kind of stuff. The kind of the funny things. But I think we do need to keep an eye on that, and we've been keeping an eye on it as well. We've been experimenting in that space, with. Some things work really well, and some things don't, and still need somebody to do that. But it's like how advertising agencies have evolved from like the 50s, from the technologies come in with computers and Adobe software. I mean, it was all done on paper, and you had loads of artists. A lot of people kind of scared in that space, or kind of worried, and I get it, right? But I think that we're approaching it as how can we implement it to help us, which actually helps our customer, because you're going to need somebody to manage it. You're going to need somebody to have an in-depth knowledge of it. So there's just kind of that pivot, and I think that happens all the time, right? And I think, but I think the artificial intelligence is, big in the news and really a hot topic at this point. But I think we just embrace it. But I'm worried that it's going to get to, Terminator, Skynet kind of level.
I think everybody's had that kind of a thought about it, actually.
Yeah. That's what worries about me. If it can write an article, I'm okay that it's kind of writing an article, right? Like, but when it gets to, now I'm worried about robots taking over. So
I think that's the worry that everybody's felt. Yeah, Skynet taken over.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, I've had a few conversations about AI, especially in various industries. Advertising, app development, even branding. And I think the overall consensus on it in I think all of these various sort of industries is that at the end of the day we need to put safeguards in place. It's just like when the internet came out in the late 90s when everybody was starting to use that. It can be used for good or bad, and I just think it goes about regulating it properly at the end of the day. But yeah, I think it's a good tool to use, especially if you want to drive productivity, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think just like anything else, these kinds of things evolve, and
Exactly.
and all of a sudden it's going to spawn off a different industry. It's going to have something else that goes differently, or people have different ideas to develop different technologies that are spawn other industries, right? So, but I get it, where people are just we're all a little leery of change, right? And all a little worried about what's going to happen with my job, or I get it. Like I totally get it. But one of our clients is in the education space, and they always talk about and some of their messaging that we develop is trying to get people to reskill or upskill, like if and that applies not only to a trade or in the medical industry or whatever, but all of us need to continue to upskill and pivot and learn new things. I mean, it all comes that way, because then it could take us to something really cool and really fun and elevate us. So I'm cool with it.
I couldn't agree more. I really think so. I don't know if you know this, but DesignRush hosts a complete directory of creative agencies around the globe. We've kind of touched on this a little bit before, but what do you think are some of the major benefits of any type of agency outsourcing for branding and marketing, such as your agency?
What, outsourcing to us kind of thing?
Well, yeah, exactly. So the benefits of getting your agency to come in and help them out.
Well, I think that you're number one, you're getting, and I think this is huge, you're getting a fresh perspective that's outside the group. And I think that there's going to be a lot of internal opinions and expertise and experience, and all those things are really good. But to have somebody coming in kind of with fresh eyes that is approaching it from how we approach it. And so if we were to do a brand strategy for an education or a SaaS company, for example, yeah, we've learned from that in the past brand strategy we've done for somebody else, but we're still going to approach it from that fresh perspective, like we've never done it before. We're still going to do the research. We're still going to get the background. We're still going to talk to individuals, because that could change. Some it could be the same, some it could change. But I think hiring an outside agency, a big one is having that fresh perspective. And I think that our process, I'm really happy with how our process has evolved over the years, but it's very linear. It's very straightforward. And it's designed to draw out, all of those little things that you wouldn't necessarily do or could say within the group internally. So I think that's a huge benefit, is drawing out those kind of ideas, but also approaching it from we approach it like we've never done it before, or for that industry anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that. So what can creative agencies like encite do to keep up with any of the constantly evolving marketing industry trends, or anything that's always, it is always changing. So what do you guys say, for instance, do to keep up with that?
Well, I mean, things like this, like we're kind of finding podcasts and finding all of the content out there. We have each one of our team members typically stays on top of their trends in their particular industry. So, I mean, a good thing like this is there's so much content out there of people experimenting with new techniques and new strategies, and obviously there's so much out there that some of it you have to take with a grain of salt, kind of thing. But staying kind of dialed into marketing associations, we still stay dialed in there. But listening to podcasts in each of these individual skill sets, I guess. But the other thing that we do as well is I know that for example, we're in social. So and this is available to everybody, but our digital strategist, I mean, she's always talking to Meta and discussing with them what they're sharing, what those trends are. LinkedIn does kind of the same thing. So staying in trends of design and email and graphic design, so you kind of keep up with some of the graphic design associations as well, and they're starting to develop out great content or have great content about kind of where that's going. So I think that it's a keeping your ear to the ground, continuing to educate yourself, being involved in trade organizations and consuming all that content is out there. There's a very specific strategy in place on our side to making sure that we're keeping up with that.
Cool. That's very, very cool. I like that. So finally, Adam, what piece of advice would you, or do you wish you could have given yourself when you were at the very start of this journey with encite?
That's a really good question. And I think that one thing that advice that I would give myself is two words. I would think be fearless. I think that it is starting out as an entrepreneur. It is super scary. It is you don't know where your money's coming from. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, right? Like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my mortgage. I don't know, I don't know how am I going to make money. But in the beginning, I started developing out, and I made decisions based on some of that fear and being fearful. But I guess maybe I would modify that. Be strategically fearless. Don't be fearless like recklessly. So be strategically fearless and take those chances and get out there and do it. I mean, you're taking a chance that you're starting a business anyway, but if you're going to do it, and just don't be fearless, but make those kind of strategic decisions rather than just kind of you're all over the place kind of thing. But I would tell myself that, but that's one of the things that we've really kind of concentrated on, and kind of our mantra within the group is we are going to be fearless. We are going to take those chances. We are going to go after that idea. And we're going to evaluate that and see if it worked and learn. But we used to not take some of those chances just because we're scared, and we're not doing that no more.
Yeah, exactly. You got to know when to risk it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so happy you reached out to us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad you guys responded to my reach out. So I'm happy to do it, and I would love to be back anytime you want to have me.
Well, 100%. We would love to have you again. I'm sure. I'm sure this is not the last time our we're going to cross. So, and that's a wrap for today's episode. If you're looking for a creative agency for your project, we've got you covered. Visit DesignRush.com/marketplace. Our marketplace offers a curated selection of agencies that can provide the solutions you need to turn your dream project into a reality. Again, I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. Stay curious and see you in the next episode.